Hi there, welcome to Hushed History Channel. Tonight, we're tiptoeing through the perfume corridors of Versailles, where the Sun King's architects designed bedrooms with more windows than a modern office building, and for good reason. You're about to discover why Marie Antoinette's morning routine involved 30 aristocrats watching her get dressed. And trust me, after learning what really went on behind those gilded doors, you'll never complain about your lack of privacy again. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Drop your location and local time in the comments below. Now, close your eyes and listen. You push open the heavy oak doors of the king's bedchamber at Versailles, and immediately, the sweet scent of orange blossom water, mixed with something distinctly human, fills your nostrils. It's 1675, and you're standing in the most public private space in Europe. The crimson silk curtains surrounding Louis XIV's bed aren't just decorative. They're the stage curtains for the most intimate theatre in France. Every morning, you watch as hundreds of nobles crowd into this room for the lever, the king's rising ceremony, where getting dressed becomes a choreographed performance of power. You notice the bed itself sits dead center in the room, raised on a platform like an altar. This isn't accidental. Louis XIV understood that sex and power were inseparable in the royal palace. When he consummated his marriage to Maria Theresa of Spain, over 40 courtiers stood in this very room, watching to ensure the union was properly completed. The Spanish ambassador actually leaned in close enough to hear, well, everything. One historian still argues whether the infamous certificate of consummation, signed that night, included unnecessarily graphic details, or if that's just court gossip that's grown with time. The mirrors. Oh, the mirrors everywhere. You count at least 17 in this chamber alone, and that's before you even glance toward the hall of mirrors down the corridor. These aren't just for vanity. They serve a much more practical purpose in the palace's culture of exhibitionism. Every surface reflects what's happening from multiple angles, ensuring that nothing, absolutely nothing, remains private. The Duke of Saint-Simon's memoirs describe catching glimpses of the king's mistresses in various states of undress, simply by knowing which mirrors to watch while walking past doorways. You're probably thinking this sounds like a nightmare, but here's the thing. Privacy wasn't just absent at Versailles, it was actively discouraged. The palace's architects, under Louis's direct orders, created a honeycomb of interconnected rooms with multiple entrances. Your bedroom might have 4 different doors, each leading to another noble's chambers. The official reason? Efficiency of movement for servants. The real reason becomes clear after dark when you hear the soft padding of silk slippers on parquet floors as courtiers navigate what one British ambassador called the most sophisticated adultery network in Christendom. Speaking of mistresses, you learn quickly that the king's official mistress, the maîtresse en titre, holds more power than most government ministers. Madame de Maintenon, whom Louis would secretly marry later, actually conducted state business from her bed while the king sat beside her. Foreign ambassadors would present their credentials while she lounged in her nightgown, occasionally offering political advice between spoonfuls of breakfast chocolate. The really scandalous part. She started this practice when she was still married to another man, the paralyzed poet Paul Scarron, who apparently found the arrangement amusing enough to write satirical verses about it. Here's a detail they definitely didn't teach you in school. The palace employed an official position called the porte-chaise d'affaires, literally, the bearer of the business chair. This unfortunate soul's job was to carry the close stool, a fancy portable toilet, and stand outside whatever room the king was, entertaining in, just in case nature called mid-performance. The position paid surprisingly well, probably because the bearer saw and heard things that could destroy kingdoms. One former bearer, Claude Desailly, later testified about the black masses held by the king's mistress, Madame de Montespan, though historians still debate whether these were actual satanic rituals or just very creative role-play that got out of hand. You find yourself standing in a torch-lit chamber at Hampton Court Palace, where the stone walls seem to pulse with anxiety. It's 1540, and Henry VIII has just married his fifth wife, Catherine Howard. She's 17. He's 49 and weighs roughly the same as 3 normal men. The bed before you isn't just furniture. It's a political instrument, a diplomatic tool, and occasionally a death trap. The sheets are pure white silk, specifically chosen because they'll show evidence. You're about to witness one of history's most horrifying job requirements, the public verification of royal consummation. The ritual begins before the couple even reaches the bedroom. You follow the procession of nobles, clergy, and physicians. Yes, physicians, as they escort the newlyweds to their chamber. The Archbishop of Canterbury sprinkles holy water on the bed while muttering Latin prayers for fertility. You catch the eye of Thomas Culpeper, a young courtier standing near the door, and notice how Catherine glances at him just a moment too long. That look will cost them both their heads in less than 2 years. But tonight, everyone pretends not to see. The undressing ceremony makes modern reality TV look tasteful. Ladies in waiting strip Catherine piece by piece while making loud observations about her body's suitability for childbearing. Good hips, one announces. Excellent breast development, declares another, as if appraising livestock. Meanwhile, Henry's gentlemen of the bedchamber perform the same humiliating inventory on the king, though you notice they're much quieter about certain shortcomings. One gentleman, Sir Anthony Denny, later wrote in his private papers that he spent the entire ceremony staring at the ceiling beams to avoid laughing at what he called His Majesty's diminished weaponry. Here's where it gets truly bizarre. Once the couple climbs into bed, the witnesses don't leave. They arrange themselves around the room, close enough to hear, but supposedly far enough to not see. Though the bed curtains are suspiciously sheer, the Spanish ambassador stands near the headboard, ear cocked like a hunting dog. The French envoy positions himself by the foot of the bed, frantically scribbling notes. You realize these aren't just witnesses, they're international reporters, and tomorrow every court in Europe will know exactly how things went, or didn't go. The pressure to perform under these conditions drives kings to desperate measures. You learn that Henry kept a special apothecary who supplied various vigor-enhancing concoctions. The ingredients list reads like a witch's shopping list. Ground rhinoceros horn, mercury, lead sugar, and something cryptically labelled maiden's tears. No wonder Henry's health deteriorated so rapidly. The real tragedy? His desperation for a male heir led him to consume so many toxic aphrodisiacs that historians still argue whether they caused the leg ulcers that eventually killed him or just made them worse. But Catherine Howard's case reveals the deadliest aspect of Tudor bedroom politics, when she fails to produce an heir quickly enough. Henry's advisors begin investigating her past. They discover she wasn't a virgin on her wedding night, a crime punishable by death when you're supposed to be breeding the next King of England. The evidence? Testimony from her step-grandmother's servants who describe finding Catherine and her music teacher Francis Derham doing things that definitely weren't in the Lute curriculum. The Duchess's maid, Mary Hall, provides such graphic details that the court recorder actually writes content too vile to record in the official documents. You watch as poor Catherine, barely 18 now, stands trial for adultery. The prosecutors present her love letters to Thomas Culpeper as evidence, reading aloud passages like, "It makes my heart to die to think what fortune I have that I cannot be always in your company." The really damning part, she signed one letter, "Yours as long as life endures." Life, as it turns out, won't endure much longer. On February 13th, 1542, you stand in the crowd at Tower Green as Catherine Howard becomes the fifth person to lose their head over Henry VIII's bedroom failures. The Tudor obsession with royal fertility creates a whole industry of bedroom spies. Ladies in waiting count menstrual rags, physicians examine chamber pots, and servants report every morning's nausea. When Anne of Cleves arrives from Germany to become wife number 4, Henry sends his painter Hans Holbein to create her portrait. What Holbein doesn't paint, and what the court gossips whisper endlessly about, is that he also carries secret instructions to report on her breast size, hip width, and any visible signs of fertility. The portrait shows a pleasant-looking woman. The private report, recently discovered in the Vatican archives, describes her dugs as sufficient for suckling and notes that she appears to have all her teeth. You stumble through the Habsburg Palace in Madrid, where the air itself feels thick with genetic catastrophe. The year is 1661, and you're attending the wedding of Charles II of Spain to Marie-Louise of Orleans. The groom can barely stand upright. His jaw protrudes so far that he cannot chew food. His tongue is too large for his mouth, and at age 4, he still couldn't walk. You're witnessing the spectacular finale of centuries of royal inbreeding, where family trees looked more like family wreaths, and the bedroom became a laboratory for genetic horror. The portrait gallery tells the story better than any document. You trace your finger along the painted faces. Uncle marrying niece, first cousins wedding first cousins, and in one spectacular case, an uncle marrying his niece who was also his first cousin once removed. Philip II married his niece Anna of Austria. Their son, Philip III, married Margaret of Austria, who was both his second cousin and his wife's first cousin. By the time you reach Charles II's portrait, you're looking at someone whose genome contained more loops than a Celtic knot. Scientists calculating his inbreeding coefficient recently discovered he was more genetically compromised than the child of siblings would be. The wedding night preparations for Charles II border on medical procedures. Physicians surround the bed armed with fertility potions, blessing oils, and, rather optimistically, swaddling clothes for the hoped-for heir. The Queen's ladies whisper about the special cushions designed to prop up the king in positions that might enable consummation despite his physical deformities. You overhear one French lady-in-waiting confide that they've sewn bells into the king's nightshirt, so attendants will know if he's having one of his frequent seizures during intimate moments. But here's the detail that makes your skin crawl. The Habsburgs knew exactly what they were doing. The palace archives contain letters between royal advisors explicitly discussing the preservation of sacred blood through intermarriage. One document from Philip IV's reign calculates, with disturbing precision, the exact degree of relation permitted while still maintaining dynastic purity. They had genealogists whose entire job was creating charts showing how to marry your relatives without technically violating church law. The Pope granted so many dispensations for Habsburg marriages that the Vatican created a special filing system just for their incest exemptions. You discover the palace's Portrait Room of Sorrows, an unofficial name whispered by servants, where they keep paintings of the Habsburg children who didn't survive. Row after row of tiny coffins painted in exquisite detail, many containing infants with visible deformities. One particularly haunting portrait shows Philip IV's daughter, the Infanta Margaret Theresa, surrounded by her dead siblings' portraits like ghostly playmates. She would later marry her own uncle, Emperor Leopold I, continuing the cycle. Their daughter lived only to age 6, described in court documents as having convulsions of the most distressing nature and a skull shaped like a melon. The bedroom itself becomes a medical theatre. Charles II's physician, Dr. Gilleen, maintains detailed records of every attempted consummation. His notes, written in Latin for discretion but recently translated, describe applying warming plasters to His Majesty's private parts and administering tinctures to encourage the animal spirits. One entry mentions trying to treat the king's constant drooling during intimate moments by having him bite on a leather strap, though this did cause the Queen some alarm. The physician notes that successful completion of marital duties often required manual assistance from myself or my apprentices, a job description that probably wasn't covered in medical school. You notice something even more disturbing in the women's quarters. The Habsburg princesses, despite being products of the same inbreeding, were still shipped off as breeding stock to other European courts. Maria Anna of Spain, daughter of Philip III, was engaged to her first cousin at age 8. When he died, they simply engaged her to his brother, also her first cousin. The wedding portraits show girls who look eerily similar because, genetically speaking, they practically are. One court painter complained that he could use the same facial template for all Habsburg princesses and just change the clothing. Historians still argue whether the famous Habsburg jaw was purely genetic or partially caused by the lead-based white makeup the family obsessively used. The cosmetic recipes found in the palace pharmacy are terrifying. Lead white mixed with mercury, arsenic powder for that ethereal glow, and belladonna drops to dilate the pupils attractively. Combined with the genetic issues, it's a miracle any Habsburg survived to adulthood. The family's beauty routine was literally killing them faster than their corrupted bloodline. You slip through the marble corridors of Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, where every surface gleams with mother-of-pearl inlay, and every shadow might hide a eunuch's blade. The year is 1550, and Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent rules over an empire stretching across 3 continents. But right now, you're more interested in what rules the Sultan. Behind these walls, over 300 women live in the imperial harem, a city within a city where sex, politics, and power intertwine more intimately than anywhere else on earth. The sweet scent of jasmine can't quite mask the underlying smell of ambition and fear. The word harem literally means forbidden, and you quickly understand why. This isn't the Orientalist fantasy of silk-draped women lounging by fountains. It's a sophisticated political institution with its own hierarchy, economy, and deadly serious rules. You follow the chief black eunuch, a man who sacrificed everything below the waist for unimaginable power above it. He's technically a slave, yet he commands more authority than most viziers. His networks of spies throughout the palace report every whisper, every glance, every monthly cycle of every woman who might catch the Sultan's eye. The selection process for new harem members makes modern beauty pageants look quaint. Girls arrive from across the empire, some sold by impoverished families, others captured in raids, a few offered as diplomatic gifts. You watch as the mistress of the robes inspects the newest arrivals, checking teeth like a horse trader, measuring hip-to-waist ratios with a knotted rope, and performing virginity tests that would make a gynecologist blush. One girl from Circassia stands out, flawless pale skin, green eyes, and what the Ottoman poets call a waist that could be encircled by two hands. Within 5 years, she'll be Hürrem Sultan, the woman who breaks 500 years of tradition by becoming a legal wife instead of just a concubine. Here's what your history teacher definitely skipped. The harem operates on a corporate ladder system that would impress Silicon Valley. New girls start as novices, learning Turkish, Islamic prayers, and what the instruction manual delicately calls techniques of pleasure. The textbooks, yes, there are actual textbooks, include illustrated guides that make the Kama Sutra look prudish. You glimpse one page showing 48 positions specifically designed for maximizing the chance of male offspring. Another section details recipes for vaginal suppositories made from honey, myrrh, and crocodile dung. Apparently, the Egyptians weren't the only ones with questionable beauty treatments. The path to the Sultan's bed runs through multiple gatekeepers, each taking their cut, sometimes literally. First, you must catch the eye of the Valid Sultan, the Queen Mother, who essentially runs the world's most exclusive matchmaking service. She maintains detailed files on every woman, their menstrual cycles, their talents, their likelihood of producing sons. You peek at one file that includes lock of hair, a vial of saliva for breath quality testing, and disturbingly intimate sketches. The Valide Sultan's approval means promotion to Gedikli, privileged one, which comes with better quarters and access to the Sultan's pool parties, though party might be too innocent a word for what happens in those steamy marble chambers. The lucky few who actually share the Sultan's bed face a bizarre aftermath. Immediately after intercourse, the keeper of the Sultan's seed rushes in to verify that consummation occurred and to position the woman at an angle believed to encourage conception. She must lie still for exactly 45 minutes while prayers are recited over her abdomen. If she's fortunate enough to conceive, she becomes Iqbal favorite and gets her own apartment. If she bears a son, she achieves the rank of Haseki and gains the right to kill anyone who displeases her, a privilege she can exercise 3 times per year without facing consequences. But here's where it gets truly dark. The moment a woman bears a son, every other pregnant woman in the harem becomes her mortal enemy. The Ottoman succession follows a charming tradition called fratricide. When a new sultan takes power, he murders all his brothers to prevent civil war. This means mothers literally train their sons from birth to kill their half-brothers. The harem's nursery wing feels less like a daycare and more like a gladiator school. You watch 5-year-old princes practicing with wooden daggers while their mothers whisper strategies for survival. Historians still debate whether the mysterious deaths of 12 princes in 1595 resulted from plague or from one particularly ambitious concubine's knowledge of herbs. You stride into the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, where the chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across surfaces that have witnessed more debauchery than a Vegas penthouse. It's 1762, and Catherine the Great has just orchestrated a coup against her husband Peter III. Technically, she had him murdered, but the official story involves a sudden illness that coincidentally struck right after she seized power. Now you're about to discover how a German princess turned Russian empress revolutionized the art of mixing statecraft with stagecraft and bedroom politics with actual politics. The smell of French perfume and gunpowder creates an intoxicating mix that perfectly captures her reign. The rumors about Catherine start before you even reach her private chambers. Courtiers whisper about her collection of explicitly carved furniture, including a table supported by wooden penises and chairs decorated with intimate scenes that would make a porn director blush. You search for this mythical erotic furniture room, but like most stories about Catherine, the truth proves both less extreme and more interesting than the legend. What you do find is her private cabinet containing over 200 erotic art pieces, including Japanese shunga prints, Indian miniatures, and Greek pottery depicting activities that definitely weren't Olympic sports. She called it her education collection and used it to instruct younger lovers in what she termed advanced techniques of diplomatic relations. Her bedroom operates like a well-oiled ministry. Catherine maintains a rotating roster of official lovers. She calls them her favorites, each serving about 2 years before receiving a generous retirement package. The position comes with a salary of 100,000 rubles annually, more than most generals, a fully staffed apartment connected to hers by a private staircase, and upon dismissal, usually an estate with several thousand serfs. You calculate that she spent more on ex-lovers' severance packages than on the entire Russian Navy. One former favorite, Semyon Zorik, opens a boarding school with his payoff. Another, Alexander Lanskoy, receives enough to build a palace that rivals Versailles. The selection process for new favorites resembles a combination of job interview and medical exam. Count Potemkin, her greatest love and possible secret husband, actually helps screen candidates after their romantic phase ends. You read his evaluation notes: good stamina, excellent French, mediocre poetry, spectacular thighs. The Empress's physician, Dr. P. Rogerson, performs thorough health inspections that include what he delicately records as verification of masculine vigor and disease prevention protocols. One rejected candidate complains that the medical exam lasted longer than his actual audience with the Empress. Here's the scandal that shocked even the libertine French court: Catherine's public philosophy of sexual liberation. She writes openly about desire in letters to Voltaire, arguing that the body's pleasures enhance rather than diminish intellectual capacity. She installs bidets throughout the palace, considered scandalously French and associated with prostitution, and insists her ladies-in-waiting use them. When prudish visitors express shock, she lectures them on hygiene while deliberately using the crudest possible language. The British ambassador's wife faints during one such discourse on the cleansing of the feminine temple. But Catherine's greatest innovation might be turning her lovers into a shadow government. Platon Zubov, her last favorite, she's 60, he's 22, effectively runs Russian foreign policy from her bed. You watch him conduct negotiations with the Ottoman Empire while wearing a silk robe and nothing else, pausing occasionally to feed Catherine grapes or massage her feet. The Turkish ambassador later writes that he felt he was negotiating with a Roman emperor's catamite, but admits Zubov drove surprisingly hard bargains between caresses. Historians still argue whether Catherine's boy toys weakened the state or whether she brilliantly used sex appeal to distract opponents while she consolidated power. The horse story, yes, we have to address it, represents 18th century fake news at its finest. You trace the rumor to French revolutionaries who spread it to discredit monarchy in general and powerful women in particular. The mechanics alone make it impossible. You've seen the palace stables, and trust me, the geometry doesn't work. What actually kills Catherine is a stroke on the toilet, which her courtiers cover up by moving her to her bed before announcing her death. Even in death, they protect the imperial dignity. The persistent bestiality rumor probably stems from her extensive funding of veterinary science and her genuine love of riding horses conventionally, with a saddle. You discover her secret correspondence with her favorites, hidden in a wall panel behind a portrait of Peter the Great. These letters reveal a woman who separated love from power with surgical precision. To Grigory Orlov, she writes, "In bed you are Apollo. In council you are a turnip. Return to what you do best." To Potemkin, "My golden pheasant, my heart, my twin soul. Shall we conquer Turkey before or after dinner?" She numbers her lovers in code and keeps efficiency ratings. Number 12 scores high on conversation, but low on execution. Number 18 receives top marks across all categories, but gets dismissed anyway for excessive emotional attachment. You glide down the Nile on Cleopatra's golden barge, where the purple sails billow with perfume that announces the Queen of Egypt from miles away. It's 41 BCE, and you're witnessing history's most famous seduction, though seduction seems too passive a word for what Cleopatra orchestrates. The barge itself functions as a floating aphrodisiac. Every surface shimmers with gold leaf. Frankincense burns in silver censers, and musicians play melodies specifically composed to, as one Roman chronicler put it, encourage the blood to flow to important places. Mark Antony doesn't stand a chance. The Egyptian palace operates on principles of pleasure that make Roman orgies look like church picnics. You follow servants preparing Cleopatra's morning bath, not water, but donkey milk mixed with honey and sea salt. 300 donkeys live in the palace stables solely to provide fresh milk for her daily soaks. The milk bath isn't just vanity. Court physicians claim it maintains vaginal pH balance and enhances natural lubrication. One papyrus fragment, recently decoded, contains her personal recipe for a pre-encounter douche. 7 parts rose water, 3 parts white wine vinegar, 1 part crushed pearls, oil of bitter almonds. At current prices, each application would cost about $50,000. Cleopatra's true genius lies in transforming sex into statecraft. When Julius Caesar arrives in Alexandria, she doesn't await him in the throne room. She has herself smuggled into his bedroom wrapped in a carpet, emerging naked except for gold dust and strategically placed jewels. You learn this wasn't spontaneous. She rehearsed the unveiling 17 times with her body doubles to perfect the angle of revelation. Her personal notes, written in the margins of Homer's Iliad, include diagrams of optimal carpet unrolling positions and reminders like arch back on count 3 and maintain eye contact during emergence. The palace pharmacy reads like an ancient sex shop inventory. Shelves overflow with aphrodisiacs that range from plausible to insane. Spanish fly, powdered rhinoceros horn, cobra blood, crushed scarab beetles, and something labeled phoenix tears that's probably just expensive salt water. Cleopatra's personal physician, Dioscorides, maintains detailed records of her contraceptive regimen, crocodile dung suppositories, honey-soaked sea sponges, and a mysterious plant called silphium that the Egyptians harvest to extinction partly due to its birth control properties. Modern botanists still search for surviving silphium, calling it the ancient Plan B. Here's the detail that would make your history professor blush. The palace features a secret wing dedicated entirely to sexual training. Young priestesses of Isis spend years learning the sacred positions of the goddess, a combination of tantric techniques, acrobatics, and what we'd now call sex therapy. You peek into a training session where women practice with carved jade implements while an instructor critiques their rhythm and breathing. The curriculum includes delaying the Great Flood, male orgasm control, awakening the sleeping serpent, dealing with erectile dysfunction, and the 1,000-petal lotus, a position that apparently requires advanced yoga skills and possibly joint hypermobility. The real power move comes during Antony's extended visit. Cleopatra establishes the Society of Inimitable Livers, essentially a sex club disguised as a philosophical society. Members compete in elaborate erotic games. Whoever can maintain arousal longest while reciting. Aristotle wins a golden phallus trophy. You attend one meeting where they play Dionysian dice. Each roll determines which partner, position, and stimulant the players must employ. Antony loses badly, which in this game means winning spectacularly. Roman spies report back to Octavian that his rival spends more time horizontal than vertical, though they admit the intelligence gathering is quite enjoyable. But beneath the perfume pleasures lurks cold calculation. Cleopatra bears Caesar a son, Caesarion, timing the birth to coincide with politically advantageous astronomical events. She later produces 3 children with Antony, each pregnancy strategically planned to cement alliances. Palace astrologers work with her menstrual calendar to ensure conception during auspicious planetary alignments on. One archived horoscope predicts that a child conceived when Venus kisses Mars in the house of Scorpio will rule the known world. Historians still debate whether she believed the astrology or just used it to make her reproductive choices seem divinely ordained. The legendary golden vibrator story has a kernel of truth. Palace inventories list several therapeutic wands made from polished jade, ivory, and yes, gold. One particular item, described as Cleopatra's personal massager, features a hollow core that servants would fill with buzzing bees to create vibration. The device disappeared during the Roman conquest, but similar implements appear in Chinese palaces centuries later, suggesting either parallel innovation or the world's first sex toy trade routes. You climb the spiral staircase of a medieval castle tower, where each step echoes with hypocrisy. It's 1180 in Chateau Gaillard, and the stone walls supposedly represent Christian virtue and knightly honor. But you're about to discover that medieval nobles treated the church's teachings on chastity about as seriously as they treated the commandment against murder. The castle's architecture itself betrays the truth. Hidden passages connect bedchambers. Peepholes pierce supposedly solid walls, and certain towers contain rooms accessible only through trapdoors. Perfect for encounters that definitely weren't prayer meetings. The castle's morning routine reveals the first contradiction. You watch as Lord Geoffrey emerges from his chamber, not with his wife Lady Margaret, but with his wife's teenage lady-in-waiting. Everyone pretends not to notice. The servants, the guards, even Lady Margaret herself, who's busy entertaining the castle chaplain in a way that has nothing to do with spiritual guidance. The medieval noble marriage operates on practical terms. Produce heirs, combine lands, seal alliances, love, pleasure, and actual compatibility? Those you find elsewhere, preferably with someone else's spouse. The church's official position creates an almost comic level of sexual dysfunction. According to canonical law, Sex is only permitted for procreation, only in one position, missionary naturally, only on certain days, not during Lent, not on Sundays, not on feast days, not during menstruation, pregnancy or nursing. You calculate that leaves about 40 days per year when married couples can legally copulate. The penalty for breaking these rules? Confession, penance, and a donation to the church building fund. Conveniently, the castle priest keeps a price list. Anal costs 3 years penance or 12 gold coins. Oral requires 7 years penance or 25 gold coins. The church coffers overflow with sexual sin taxes, but here's where medieval ingenuity shines. Castle architects incorporate what they call privies, but function as so much more. These small chambers, supposedly for bodily functions, connect different parts of the castle through narrow passages. You follow one tunnel that links the Lord's privy to the guest quarters, another that connects the ladies' chamber to the barracks. The smell is terrible, but apparently passion overcomes disgust. One mason's mark appears repeatedly in these passages, a master builder who specialized in what castle records obliquely call discrete architectural solutions. The medieval sex manual industry thrives despite, or because of, church prohibition. You discover a hidden library containing illustrated manuscripts that make modern erotica look tame. The Secret Garden of Venus features marginalia with helpful tips like for quieter pleasure during vigil nights and positions suitable for confessional booths. Another text, Solomon's Sacred Wisdom, pretends to be biblical commentary but actually provides detailed instructions for anal sex, complete with diagrams labeled as architectural plans for Solomon's temple. The illuminated letters contain couples engaged in activities that definitely aren't calligraphy. Chastity belts, those symbols of medieval sexual oppression, tell a different story than you learned. Most aren't medieval at all. Victorian fantasies about the barbaric past. The few authentic ones you find aren't locked by jealous husbands, but worn voluntarily by women as anti-rape devices during sieges. More interesting are the codpieces, those aggressive bulges in men's clothing that serve as both fashion statement and false advertising. You examine one belonging to Duke Richard. It's padded with sawdust and features a hidden compartment containing love letters and a vial of what the label calls Saracen Stallion Powder. The castle's summer festival reveals medieval sexuality at its most hypocritical. The church sponsors a morality play about the Virgin Mary, while nobles sneak off to the woods for May games that involve switching partners, fertility rituals, and enough mead to float a longship. You witness the Lord of Misrule ceremony, where social order inverts. Servants command nobles, women pursue men, and the priest gets spectacularly drunk while blessing copulating couples for abundant harvest. Come morning, everyone returns to their proper roles and pretends the orgy was just rustic entertainment. Historians still argue whether the droit du seigneur, the Lord's supposed right to deflower virgin brides, actually existed or was later propaganda. You find evidence for a modified version, lords charging virginity taxes that brides could pay to avoid the bedding ceremony. The account books list these fees between sheep shearing and mill grinding, suggesting they were just another revenue stream. One entry reads, from Willem the baker, for his daughter's maidenhead, 2 silver marks, note, paid in bread for 3 months. The Lord's true power lay not in taking virginity, but in making everyone pretend he could. You pass through the vermilion gates of the forbidden city, where 9,999 rooms house the sexual mathematics of imperial China. It's 1661, and the young Kangxi emperor has just inherited not only the dragon throne, but also 3,000 women and a bureaucracy dedicated entirely to managing his reproductive schedule. The numbers alone stagger you. If he spent one night with each concubine, it would take over 8 years to work through the rotation. The palace solution involves spreadsheets that would make a Fortune 500 company jealous, and a lottery system that turns the emperor's bed into the world's most exclusive raffle prize. The Department of Imperial Bedchamber Management employs 47 full-time staff members whose sole job involves orchestrating the emperor's sex life. You shadow the chief eunuch of the bedchamber as he reviews tonight's options, consulting astronomical charts, medical reports, and a color-coded calendar tracking every woman's menstrual cycle. Green dots indicate peak fertility. Red means hands-off. Yellow suggests recreational only. He cross-references this with the court astrologer's recommendations. Tonight, Mars aligns favorably with Venus, suggesting a woman born in the year of the horse would be most auspicious. The logistics rival a military campaign. The selection process begins at sunset. Eunuchs present jade tablets, each inscribed with a concubine's name, rank, and relevant statistics: age, birth date, number of previous imperial encounters, offspring produced. The emperor flips a tablet to indicate his choice, though sometimes he just waves dismissively, meaning, surprise me. You learn that certain tablets are weighted. The Empress Dowager secretly influences selections by having favorites tablets made from heavier jade, making them more likely to catch the emperor's attention when shuffled. Politics infiltrates even the randomness. Here's the part that makes Western royal bedrooms look positively casual. The chosen concubine cannot simply walk to the emperor's chamber. First, she undergoes a full body inspection by female eunuchs checking for weapons, poisons, or inauspicious marks. Then she's stripped completely naked and wrapped in a yellow silk cloak. No hidden anything allowed near the divine presence. A eunuch carries her on his back to the emperor's bed, deposits her at the foot, and she must crawl up from the bottom, symbolizing her absolute submission. The eunuch waits outside, calling out time intervals. After exactly 30 minutes, he shouts, "Time is up," 3 times. If the emperor doesn't respond, eunuchs rush in to physically remove the woman, mid-act if necessary. The post-coital procedures would horrify modern medical professionals. Palace physicians immediately examine the woman, checking for successful receipt of the dragon seed. They press specific acupuncture points believed to encourage conception, make her drink herbal concoctions that smell like rotting fish mixed with cinnamon, and record everything in ledgers with disturbing detail. One entry reads, "Third princess consort received imperial favor for 17 minutes. Moderate vigor observed. Dragon roared twice. Prescribed double dose of cordyceps and turtle blood. Probability of conception, auspicious." These records span thousands of volumes, creating the world's most comprehensive database of royal sexual encounters. The palace eunuchs represent history's strangest career path. Castrated as boys, they sacrifice their manhood for proximity to power. You meet Wei Zhongxian, who parlayed his position as bedroom attendant into becoming de facto ruler of China. He might lack testicles, but he compensates with cunning, using his intimate knowledge of everyone's sexual secrets to blackmail his way to the top. Eunuchs develop their own sign language to communicate about bedroom activities without speaking. A throat touch means the emperor finished quickly. Ear tugging indicates he fell asleep, and rapid blinking suggests performance issues requiring herbal intervention. But the Forbidden City's most guarded secret involves the emperor's sex education. At age 14, imperial princes receive instruction from carefully selected palace women known as aunties, experienced concubines past childbearing age who teach practical skills. You glimpse one training session through a carved screen. The prince practices on jade models while his auntie corrects his technique with a pointer, like the world's most awkward driving lesson. The curriculum includes the 9 shallow, 1 deep method, the crane spreads its wings, and something mysteriously called conquering the Jade Mountain. The final exam involves demonstrating proficiency with 8 different partners in one night, though historians debate whether this was actual practice or just intimidating propaganda. The concubines themselves create an underground economy of sexual competition. They trade beauty secrets, fertility drugs, and insider information about the emperor's preferences. One concubine, Lady Neohuru, corners the market on imported Spanish fly, marking up the price 500% and accepting payment in gossip about rivals' menstrual irregularities. Another develops a lucrative side business, selling dragon attraction powder made from ground pearls and deer antler, guaranteed to make the emperor flip your tablet. The ingredients probably do nothing, but the confidence boost might help. You ascend the blood-slick steps of Tenochtitlan's Grand Temple, where the boundaries between sex, death, and divinity dissolve into something that makes your modern mind real. It's 1519, just before the Spanish arrive, and Montezuma II presides over fertility ceremonies that would send contemporary anthropologists into therapy. The air tastes metallic, a mixture of copal incense, human blood, and the musk of thousands of bodies pressed together in religious ecstasy. These aren't the sanitized harvest festivals from your textbook. You're about to witness how the Aztecs turned reproduction into cosmic duty and group sex into prayer. The palace complex doubles as a theological brothel. Montezuma maintains hundreds of wives and concubines, not from mere lust, but from religious obligation. The emperor must seed the earth as the gods seed the sky. You watch him emerge from purification rituals, his penis pierced with maguey thorns, blood dripping onto bark paper that priests will burn as offering. The pain supposedly heightens spiritual awareness and sexual potency. One Spanish chronicler later writes that Aztec nobles had members so scarred from bloodletting they resembled pine cones, though historians debate whether he exaggerated for shock value or simply couldn't process what he'd seen. The spring fertility ceremony begins at midnight. Noble women, selected for their beauty and bloodline, gather in the Palace of Butterflies, wearing nothing but jade jewelry and feather headdresses. The men arrive painted in stripes, black for Tezcatlipoca, blue for Tlaloc, their erections maintained by consuming chocolatl mixed with morning glory seeds, a combination that creates what palace herbalists call the divine rod that never sleeps. You realize the Aztecs discovered Viagra centuries before Pfizer, though with significantly more hallucinogenic side effects. Here's what makes your head spin. The Aztecs practiced sacred prostitution on an industrial scale. The Ahuyanimi, pleasure women dedicated to the goddess Xochiquetzal, serve warriors and nobles in temple brothels, collecting semen in obsidian vessels for fertility rituals. They're not marginalized, they're holy. You watch one ceremony where the collected seed is mixed with amaranth dough to create life-size figures of gods, which nobles then consume in a ritual that gives eating the body of Christ a whole different context. The Spanish will later burn every codex describing these ceremonies, but they can't erase the stone carvings that explicitly depict what happens when theology meets biology. The palace temazcal, sweat lodges, host encounters that blend purification with fornication. You squeeze into one packed with slippery bodies, where the heat and psychoactive herbs create a dissociative state perfect for communicating with the divine through flesh. Participants believe they're not just having sex, but literally channeling deities. One woman claims Tlaloc enters her. She speaks in tongues, while 3 men attempt to plant rain seeds simultaneously. The priest supervising sprinkles everyone with human blood between position changes, chanting prayers that synchronize thrust patterns to cosmic rhythms. Montezuma's own sexual practices blur the line between ruler and god. Before important ceremonies, he ingests a cocktail of toad venom, cacao, and fermented agave that witnesses say makes him fuck like Quetzalcoatl himself. Palace records detail his marathon sessions, sometimes lasting days, with priests replacing exhausted partners like a sexual pit crew. The goal isn't pleasure, but cosmic maintenance. Every orgasm supposedly strengthens the barrier keeping chaos from devouring reality. No pressure, one failed harvest or earthquake, and everyone blames the emperor's inadequate bedroom performance. But here's the truly disturbing part: the flower wars. These ritualized battles exist primarily to capture victims for sacrifice, but they're also recruiting drives for the most bizarre form of consensual non-consent in history. Captured warriors face a choice: die immediately on the altar, or spend 4 days living as gods, showered with wealth, women, and whatever pleasures they desire. The catch? On day 5, they're sacrificed anyway, but only after a public orgy designed to transfer their warrior essence to Aztec nobles through sacred sodomy. Most choose the 4 days. Historians still argue whether this represents sexual slavery or a theological lottery where everyone understands the rules. The children from these ceremonies occupy a strange position, simultaneously sacred and expendable. Those conceived during eclipse orgies are marked for future sacrifice, raised in luxury specifically to die beautiful. You meet one, a boy of 12, who knows his fate, trained in poetry and flute playing, but also in sexual techniques he'll never use past 15. He seems remarkably calm about his upcoming disembowelment, explaining that his death will feed the sun god for another year. The palace tutors teach these children that their suffering is love, their blood is prayer, and their final orgasm, induced by priests during sacrifice, opens the portal between worlds. You navigate the marble corridors of Constantinople's great palace, where purple silk hangings can't quite muffle the sounds of political intrigue mixing with sexual scheming. It's 1045, and Empress Zoe Porphyrogenita, at age 67, has just married her 3rd emperor while keeping her longtime lover on imperial payroll. In Byzantine politics, the bedroom doesn't just influence the throne room. They're essentially the same room with different furniture. The palace operates on the principle that any orifice can be a path to power, and you're about to discover how Constantinople's elite turned sexual betrayal into an art form rivaling their famous mosaics. The morning court ceremony reveals Byzantine sexuality's performative nature. Empress Zoe appears draped in cloth of gold that costs more than feeding the entire city for a month, flanked by 2 adopted daughters, who everyone knows are her husband's mistresses. The Emperor Constantine IX of Monomachos stands between his wife and his official mistress, Maria Sklarina, who holds the invented title of Sebaste, essentially imperial side piece, formalized into protocol. Foreign ambassadors struggle with whether to bow lower to the wife or the mistress. The mistress wins. She controls the treasury. You discover the palace's most guarded secret. The purple chambers adjoining rooms, connected by passages that create a sexual labyrinth. One door leads to the emperor's bedroom, another to the empress's, a third to the mistress's quarters, and a fourth to what palace plans euphemistically label the reconciliation chamber, essentially a sex dungeon where political alliances are literally forged through threesomes. The walls feature mirrors at strategic angles and hollows that amplify sound, ensuring that everyone knows who's fucking whom for what purpose. One ambassador's encrypted dispatch describes negotiating a trade agreement, while the emperor penetrated his wife and mistress simultaneously, pausing between thrusts to haggle over tariff rates. The eunuch system here makes the Chinese version look straightforward. Byzantine eunuchs come in varieties: full castration, testicles only, or the mysterious crushed but not cut method that supposedly preserves some function. You meet the parakoimomenos, the eunuch who sleeps beside the emperor's bed, ostensibly for protection, but actually to take notes on imperial pillow talk. His memoirs, hidden in the palace library's restricted section, detail which concubines fake orgasms most, which nobles suffer from premature ejaculation, many, and who secretly prefers their own gender more than you'd expect. This sexual intelligence network rivals the CIA, using bedroom blackmail to control an empire. Here's the Byzantine innovation that changes palace sex forever: pharmaceutical warfare. The palace pharmacy stocks compounds that would make a modern chemist nervous: cantharides for arousal, hellebore for impotence, mercury for syphilis, and something labeled Persian fire for the loins that apparently causes erections lasting days. But they also develop history's first documented date rape drugs. One court physician's notes describe tincture of forgetfulness slipped into wine cups at orgies, allowing nobles to assault rivals' wives who conveniently remember nothing. The same pharmacy produces abortifacients so effective that the recipe gets classified as a state secret. The Empress Theodora's sexual history haunts these halls even 5 centuries after her death. You find hidden frescoes depicting her pre-imperial career as Constantinople's most creative prostitute, the woman who reportedly serviced 40 men in one night and complained the human body lacked sufficient orifices. But the real scandal isn't her past. It's how she weaponized it. Once crowned, she creates a network of former sex workers as spies, placing them in noble bedrooms across the empire. These women report not just who's cheating, but what they mutter during climax. Amazing what state secrets slip out mid-orgasm. Byzantine marriage law creates sexual situations that would confuse a polyamory commune. Multiple simultaneous marriages are illegal unless one partner gets monastically tonsured, technically becoming dead to the world, while still very much alive in the bedroom. You witness one ceremony where Duke Nikephoros dies to marry his mistress, while his first wife stands as mourning widow, knowing she'll share his bed again tomorrow. The church declares him legally resurrected 3 months later, when his mistress proves barren. The theological gymnastics required to justify this make transubstantiation look logically straightforward. The palace women develop their own countermeasures in this sexual arms race. They share recipes for vaginal tightening creams made from oak galls and alum, creating the illusion of virginity for politically advantageous remarriages. One duchess maintains her power through strategic lesbianism, taking female lovers to avoid pregnancy while keeping male nobles perpetually yearning. The court physicians document hysteria treatments involving ivory implements that look suspiciously like dildos, prescribed for everything from headaches to political dissent. When archaeologists later uncover a cache of these medical devices, they initially catalogue them as ceremonial scepters. You kneel on tatami mats in Edo castle's inner chambers, where the Tokugawa shogun navigates a sexual bureaucracy that makes corporate HR look casual. It's 1703, and the uku, the women's quarters, houses over 3,000 females, from scullery maids to the shogun's principal wife, all governed by rules so complex they require a dedicated library just for the regulations. The air smells of white face powder and sexual frustration. Most of these women will live their entire lives here. Seeing a man only during the shogun's brief reproductive visits, you're about to discover how Japan turned celibacy into competition and sexual access into the ultimate political currency. The daily schedule revolves around the shogun's penis like planets around the sun. At dawn, the Joro Otoshiori, senior chamberladies, receive medical reports on his lordship's morning vitality. They maintain charts tracking his erections, ejaculations, and refractory periods with scientific precision. One ledger entry reads, "Third day of plum blossoms. His lordship achieved firmness suitable for mounting. Duration: time to burn half an incense stick. Selected Lady Matsudaira. Result: vigorous but unfruitful. Prescribed ginseng and turtle blood." These records span generations, creating a database of shogunal sexual performance that modern urologists would kill to study. The education of these palace women begins in childhood. You observe a class where 12-year-old girls practice conversation with wooden puppets, learning to make political discussions sound like pillow talk. The curriculum includes the art of the sliding door, how to enter rooms seductively, strategic sobbing, crying that arouses rather than annoys, and the 17 sounds of pleasure, moans calibrated to ego boost without seeming theatrical. One instructor demonstrates how to faint attractively, crucial for virgin performances, while another teaches advanced nipple calligraphy, where women write poems on their breasts in ink that only appears when warmed by touch. Here's what makes the uku extraordinary. It's run entirely by women for women, creating a homosexual subculture the shogunate pretends doesn't exist. The Onisama system pairs older women with younger ones in relationships that everyone calls mentoring, but involves suspicious amounts of nighttime instruction. You glimpse two ladies in a supposedly empty chamber, one teaching the other proper breathing techniques that have nothing to do with meditation. The official palace position maintains that women lack the equipment for real sex, so whatever they do together doesn't count, a theological loophole that thousands exploit nightly. The selection process for the shogun's bed partners involves politics so complex it makes Renaissance Italy look straightforward. Families spend fortunes bribing the right chamberlains, but success requires more than money. The Nakai, intermediary servants, run a black market in inside information, which positions his lordship favoured last month. What perfumes trigger his arousal, whether he's in a gentle or rough phase. One document lists prices: knowledge of favourable moles, 50 Rio, moon cycle predictions, 30 Rio. Shogun's secret fetish, 200 Rio or equivalent in rice. The most valuable commodity? Knowing which ladies are secretly infertile, vital for families trying to eliminate competition. The castle's architecture reflects sexual paranoia. Every floor creaks musically, different notes for different weights, making stealth impossible. The nightingale flaws supposedly prevent assassination, but really, they alert everyone to midnight repositioning. Guards patrol with specific instructions to ignore certain sounds: rhythmic creaking, muffled cries, the distinctive slap of flesh on flesh. One guard's memoir admits he spent 30 years pretending deafness while nobles fucked meters away. The job's main hazard: developing sexual dysfunction from proximity to constant arousal without participation, an occupational hazard they call guardian's curse. But here's the darkest secret: the shogun often can't perform. Generations of inbreeding, pressure, and mercury-laced vitality medicines create rulers who prefer collecting erotic art to making it. Tokugawa Yoshige drools uncontrollably and speaks unintelligibly. His sexual encounters require translators and assistants. The palace develops elaborate workarounds: official seed proxies who impregnate concubines while the shogun watches, children passed off as divine conception, and a thriving underground market in peasant babies who mysteriously resemble certain palace guards. Historians still debate how many shogunal heirs actually carried Tokugawa blood. The Yoshiwara pleasure quarter exists partly as pressure valve for palace tensions. Noble women sneak out disguised as servants, hiring male prostitutes who specialize in what the uku forbids. These men train specifically for palace clients, learning to provide what centuries of sexual bureaucracy has crushed: spontaneity, passion, and the radical act of actually caring about female pleasure. One veteran, Taiyu, writes that palace women tip more for genuine compliments than for orgasms, emotional starvation proving worse than physical. The shogunate knows about these excursions, but allows them, calculating that satisfied women cause fewer succession crises. You recline on silk cushions in the Mughal Zenana at Fatehpur Sikri, where Emperor Akbar has architecturally encoded the Kama Sutra into a functioning palace. It's 1571, and you're surrounded by proof that Islamic modesty and Hindu eroticism can combine into something that makes both religions blush. The walls feature intricate marble screens that simultaneously hide and reveal. Women can watch court proceedings while remaining unseen, but the shadows they cast tell stories that would make censors weep. The very air seems designed for arousal. Fountains spray rose-scented water. Peacocks strut through gardens planted with aphrodisiac herbs, and every surface curves in ways that suggest the human form without quite depicting it. The Mughal approach to palace sexuality blends Persian sophistication, Hindu sensuality, and Central Asian pragmatism into a system where even mathematics gets erotic. Akbar maintains exactly 300 wives, one for each day of the year, with extras for leap years and special occasions. But here's the genius. He organizes them by expertise. You discover a hidden roster that reads like a sexual university catalogue: Chamber of the Lotus Position Specialists, Department of Oral Excellence, Division of Tantric Breathwork, and intriguingly, Experimental Techniques Laboratory. Each group has a head instructor who reports to the Chief Sultana on innovations and improvements. The education starts young but stays theoretical until marriage. Palace girls study illustrated manuscripts that make the original Kama Sutra look like a children's book. One text, the Ratirahasya, Secrets of Love, includes chapters on generating 17 types of orgasm, the use of fruits and vegetables in passion, and pharmaceutical enhancements from the spice roots. You watch a lesson where teenage princesses practice erotic dance with wooden dolls, while the instructor corrects their hip angles. The dolls have adjustable joints to demonstrate all 64 classical positions. One princess asks about position 65. The teacher smiles and says that's for married women only. Here's what shocks even seasoned travelers. The Mughals document everything with scientific precision. The royal sexographer maintains records that would make Kinsey jealous. Each encounter gets logged with duration, positions employed, sounds produced, categorized by type and volume, fluids exchanged, and satisfaction ratings from all parties. The data feeds into what they call the Great Chart of Celestial Harmonies, essentially a massive spreadsheet correlating sexual activities with astronomical events, weather patterns, and military victories. When Akbar wins a battle, his advisors check which wife he bedded when Mars entered Scorpio. The palace pharmacy rivals a modern sex shop crossed with a medieval apothecary. Shelves overflow with Persian fire, an early Viagra involving crushed beetles, Hindu heaven, cannabis mixed with opium and clarified butter, and Mongolian mare's milk, fermented with herbs that supposedly grant the stamina of Genghis Khan. But they also stock serious medicine, early condoms made from lamb intestines, pessaries of crocodile dung and honey for contraception, and mercury treatments for what they delicately call the Portuguese disease. One physician's journal describes treating a noble who overdosed on aphrodisiacs and maintained an erection for 6 days. They finally deflated him using leeches in places that make you cross your legs. The Zenana's internal economy runs on sexual currency. Women trade nights with the emperor like stock options, forming syndicates to maximize reproductive odds. If one woman's astronomical chart suggests poor fertility, she'll gift her night to an ally in exchange for future favors. You witness a negotiation where 3 wives pool their assigned nights to ensure one gets a full week during ovulation. They've calculated the emperor's sperm count recovery rate and determined that alternate day encounters optimize conception chances. The resulting child will technically have 3 mothers for inheritance purposes, a legal framework that makes modern custody battles look simple. But the real innovation lies in how the Mughals handle male performance anxiety. The palace employs fluffers. Not quite what you're thinking. These are older women, past childbearing age, who specialize in preparing nervous nobles for important conjugal duties. They use techniques ranging from erotic massage to dirty talk in 14 languages to pharmaceutical assistance. One veteran fluffer shows you her toolkit: jade rings for maintaining erections, silver tubes for directing essence, and an illustrated manual of 99 ways to resurrect the dead elephant. She claims a perfect success record over 30 years, though she admits some victories required creative definitions of success. Akbar's own practices blend the sacred and profane in ways that disturb Orthodox Muslims and Hindus equally before important encounters. He performs tantric breathing exercises, while court musicians play ragas specifically composed to enhance virility. He believes orgasms open channels to divine wisdom, convenient theology for a lusty emperor. Palace artists create miniatures of his favorite positions, which he gifts to allies as diplomatic presents. Receiving the emperor's illustrated wisdom means you're trusted enough to see the royal member in action, a weird honor that European ambassadors find deeply disturbing. You stumble into the mead-soaked Great Hall of Uppsala, where Viking royalty turns group sex into a spectator sport with religious overtones. It's 873 CE, and King Harold Fairhair is hosting a feast that makes modern music festivals look like prayer meetings. The longhouse stretches before you, lit by fires that cast writhing shadows on walls decorated with carved phalluses so detailed they could serve as medical diagrams. The air reeks of fermented honey, roasted meat, and the musk of hundreds of unwashed bodies working themselves into what the scolds will later call Freya's frenzy, though you suspect Freya herself would file a restraining order. The evening begins with what Vikings call competitive virility, which sounds athletic until you realize it's exactly what you feared. Noble men line up to demonstrate their prowess, not through combat, but through public copulation with volunteers from the crowd. Points are awarded for endurance, creativity, and volume, both sonic and seminal. The king's scald keeps score by carving notches in a wooden beam, creating what might be history's first sexual leaderboard. One Jarl manages 7 partners without pause, earning thunderous applause and the title Stallion of Stavanger, which his descendants will inexplicably include on official documents for centuries. Here's what your sanitized Viking documentaries skip. Norse succession often depends on public displays of fertility. You watch Prince Eric, Harold's eldest, struggle to maintain an erection while 300 drunk warriors offer helpful suggestions. The pressure is immense. Fail to perform, and younger brothers can challenge your claim to inherit. One particularly cruel tradition involves the mead of poetry, a concoction of fermented honey, fly agaric mushrooms, and what the herbalist mysteriously calls bear essence. It's supposed to grant sexual prowess, but mainly causes hallucinations. Eric thinks he's mounting a Valkyrie, but is actually enthusiastically humping a decorated shield while everyone politely pretends this counts. The women's participation shatters every Victorian myth about passive Viking wives. Queen Ragnhild orchestrates the festivities like a sexual symphony conductor, assigning partners based on political alliances that would make Machiavelli dizzy. She maintains a mental database of every noble's bastards, using this knowledge to prevent accidental incest, a real concern when everyone's been fucking everyone for generations. Her personal guard consists of shield maidens who double as what we'd now call dominatrixes, skilled in using weapons for purposes definitely not covered in combat training. The royal bed itself is a political statement. Carved from a single oak tree, it accommodates 8 people comfortably, and frequently does. The headboard depicts Odin's 8-legged horse, Sleipnir, which palace scholars interpret as either a fertility symbol or historical evidence of godly bestiality. Either way, the king's bed sees more traffic than a major trade route. Morning audiences often include stepping over tangled bodies from the previous night's diplomatic negotiations. One Byzantine ambassador writes home that conducting statecraft in Harold's bedroom requires the constitution of a goat and the discretion of a corpse. But beneath the drunken revelry lurks sophisticated sexual realpolitik. Viking nobles practice strategic homosexuality, not from preference but pragmatism. Penetrating another man establishes dominance. Being penetrated means submission. You witness one fascinating negotiation where 2 jarls settle a land dispute through ritualized sodomy. The winner gets the territory and the right to compose insulting poems about his rival's arga, unmanliness. These verses, called niddi, are so powerful they're legally equivalent to physical assault. One particularly creative example compares the loser's anus to a harbour that welcomes all ships and starts a feud lasting 3 generations. The Vikings export their sexual customs through rape and pillage, yes, but also through marriage alliances that traumatize European nobility. Princess Ingrid arrives at the Frankish court, with a dowry including 3 concubines, a collection of ivory dildos carved with runic blessings, and expectations about marital sharing that make her new husband faint during the wedding feast. She establishes what she calls Little Uppsala in her castle, complete with monthly fertility festivals that the local bishop desperately tries to rebrand as harvest celebrations. Her letters home complain that Frankish men lack stamina and creativity, requiring extensive training to meet minimal Norse standards. Historians still debate whether the infamous blood eagle execution method actually existed or was propaganda. But you discover the truth is both less and more disturbing. The blood eagle is real, but it's not always fatal. During certain religious festivals, volunteers undergo partial blood eagle rituals, having their ribs cracked open while maintaining erections to prove their worthiness for Valhalla. The combination of excruciating pain and sexual arousal creates transcendent states that participants describe as fucking the gods themselves. Most don't survive, but those who do are considered living conduits to the divine, their subsequent sexual partners blessed by association. You drift through the perfume gardens of Isfahan's Ali Kapı Palace, where Persian poetry about roses and nightingales serves as elaborate metaphor for activities that would make those nightingales blush. It's 1618, and Shah Abbasi has perfected the art of turning every surface into an erogenous zone. The palace walls feature mirrorwork that fragments bodies into kaleidoscopic patterns, creating infinite variations of flesh. You're about to discover how Persian rulers transformed the Arabian Nights from fantasy into documentary, then edited out the boring parts. The tales you know were sanitized for European audiences. The originals make your bedtime stories look like grocery lists. The Shah's approach to pleasure combines Zoroastrian fire worship, Islamic geometry, and pre-Islamic fertility cults into something that defies all 3 religions simultaneously. His private chambers feature a rotating bed powered by hidden water wheels, ensuring constant motion without effort. The ceiling opens to the stars through an intricate system of mirrors and lenses, allowing for astrologically timed orgasms. Court astronomers calculate the exact moment when Venus aligns with Mars over Isfahan, signaling the optimal instant for royal ejaculation. Missing this window means waiting another lunar month, building anticipation that palace poets describe as exquisite suffering sweeter than release. Here's what Scheherazade couldn't tell you. The real Arabian Nights involve pharmaceutical enhancement that would concern modern toxicologists. The palace kitchen prepares divine electuaries, paste-like aphrodisiacs containing hashish, opium, ambergris, crushed pearls, and gold leaf. One recipe calls for sparrow brains, claiming they transfer the bird's legendary lust. Another requires virgin honey from bees that have only pollinated aphrodisiac plants, mixed with powdered rhino horn and cobra venom. The dosage calculations require mathematical precision. Too little and nothing happens. Too much and you die with what physicians delicately term terminal tumescence. The Persian innovation of the Pade system creates sexual scenarios impossible elsewhere. These elaborate curtains don't just provide privacy, they enable anonymous encounters that bypass Islamic law through technicality. You can touch but not see, hear but not identify, pleasure but not know in the biblical sense. Palace architects design rooms where curtains create mazes, allowing dozens to engage simultaneously while maintaining plausible deniability about partners. One ambassador's encrypted report describes negotiating a trade agreement, while invisible hands beneath the conference table provided what he terms Persian hospitality of the most intimate variety. The storytelling tradition serves purposes beyond entertainment. Professional storytellers called nakals weave erotic tales that function as instruction manuals disguised as entertainment. You attend a performance where the narrator describes a merchant's wife discovering 49 ways to achieve satisfaction using only silk scarves and favorable wind patterns. The audience takes notes. These stories spread techniques across the empire faster than any illustrated manual. One tale about a princess who trained songbirds to stimulate her erogenous zones inspires a whole industry of specialized avian breeding. Pet shops in the bazaar advertise nightingales trained in the princess's method, but the palace's greatest secret involves the eunuchs who aren't. Shah Abbas employs false eunuchs, intact men who fake castration to access the harem. These sexual double agents require incredible acting skills, maintaining falsetto voices and beardless faces through careful plucking, while hiding their functional equipment. One exposed false eunuch's confession describes years of servicing harem women while the Shah remained oblivious. The reveal causes a purge that leaves 17 men actually castrated for certainty and establishes the world's most intimate job verification process. The Persian bathhouses attached to palaces push cleanliness into foreplay territory. The progression through increasingly hot rooms supposedly purifies the body, but mainly it creates a state of heightened sensitivity where a breath becomes a caress. The final room, where temperatures approach human limits, hosts encounters that blur the line between steam and bodily fluids. Bath attendants trained in therapeutic massage provide services that would require medical licenses in some countries and arrest warrants in others. The Shah maintains a private bath where water flows over heated marble carved into anatomically suggestive shapes, creating what one French visitor calls a fountain that teaches anatomy through experience. You uncover correspondence between Persian and Ottoman courts, comparing sexual innovations like trade secrets. The Persians mock Turkish reliance on quantity, 1,000 women but only one position, while Ottomans criticize Persian obsession with astronomical timing. They fuck by calendar rather than desire. This rivalry drives innovation. Persians develop a mechanical bed that simulates galloping horses. Ottomans respond with temperature-controlled rooms that supposedly enhance fertility. The arms race of arousal produces inventions that won't be rediscovered in Europe for centuries, though with less poetic names. You scroll through the encrypted phone of a young European prince, where WhatsApp messages mix diplomatic schedules with nude selfies and cocaine delivery confirmations. It's 2024. And despite centuries of revolution, democracy, and supposed modernization, royal bedrooms remain factories of scandal. They just live stream it now. The palace Wi-Fi password is Discreet Guest 2024, which tells you everything about how seriously they take digital security. You're about to discover how modern royalty navigates ancient breeding obligations in the age of DNA tests. Revenge porn and TMZ. Spoiler alert, they're terrible at it. The morning routine at a certain palace, lawyers prevent naming which, begins with social media damage control. The communications team reviews overnight tagged photos, identifying which drunken hookups need containing before breakfast. Television picks them up. One junior royal's Tinder profile leaked last month. His bio read, "Prince Charming seeking someone who doesn't Google me first." The matches, predictably, all Googled him first. His dick pics circulated on Twitter within hours, leading to the royal family's first official statement on penis size. craftily worded to neither confirm nor deny while emphasizing the importance of maintaining dignity in the digital age. Here's what makes modern royal sex lives uniquely complicated. The same technology that enables discretion also destroys it. You discover a WhatsApp group called Crown Jewels, where young royals share conquest stories, rate celebrity encounters, and coordinate alibis. The chat history reads like Bridgerton written by someone with severe brain damage. One message chain discusses the logistics of flying Instagram models to private islands, including debates over which jet tracking apps to avoid and how many NDAs constitute excessive. Another thread features princes comparing notes on which DNA testing companies to avoid. When establishing paternity, apparently 23andMe is out. But there's a discreet Swiss service that charges $50,000 for absolute confidentiality. The contraception situation would horrify their ancestors. Modern royals have access to every birth control method science offers, yet somehow still manage spectacular failures. One princess's bathroom cabinet, photographed by a vindictive ex and sold to tabloids, contains 17 different types of morning-after pills from various countries. She apparently believes mixing brands increases effectiveness. A young duke maintains a spreadsheet tracking partners' menstrual cycles with the dedication of a Fortune 500 CFO, yet still has 3 paternity suits pending. The royal physician prescribes so much Plan B that the palace pharmacy orders it wholesale. But technology creates new opportunities alongside new disasters. Dating apps designed exclusively for verified nobility promise discretion while charging $10,000 monthly memberships. The verification process requires proof of title, bank statements, and surprisingly, STD tests updated quarterly. You browse profiles featuring princes describing themselves as entrepreneur, philanthropist, DJ, and princesses listing interests as charity work horses/dismantling the patriarchy. The app's founder, a Belgian count who lost his fortune in crypto, claims they've facilitated 12 royal marriages and only 47 lawsuits. The real innovation? How modern royals monetize their sex lives without technically selling them. OnlyFans might be off limits, but exclusive lifestyle subscriptions offering intimate glimpses into royal living skirt the edge. One duchess charges £500 monthly for wellness content that happens to feature her in increasingly minimal yoga wear. A prince sells royal fitness programs that focus extensively on hip flexibility and stamina training. They're not selling sex, they're selling the implication of sex, wrapped in plausible deniability and LLC protection. Security measures around royal hookups now resemble intelligence operations. Booty calls require advanced teams sweeping hotel rooms for cameras, signal-blocking pouches for phones, and background checks deeper than most government clearances. One prince's security detail includes a specialist whose only job involves creating digital alibis, fake restaurant receipts, doctored CCTV footage, and coordinated social media posts establishing alternate timelines. The specialist's business card lists his title as Narrative Consistency Manager, which might be history's most creative euphemism for professional liar. The interaction between old protocols and new realities creates absurdist scenarios. You witness a formal ceremony where a prince's illegitimate child via surrogate, the surrogate was his ex-girlfriend's sister, because why not complicate everything, receives a title through legal gymnastics involving ancient laws about acknowledged natural offspring, combined with modern contract law. The child's 3 lawyers argue with palace historians about whether Instagram comments count as public acknowledgement under 14th century statutes. Meanwhile, the prince live streams the whole thing on TikTok, adding dog ear filters to the archbishop during solemn moments. As this story winds down, you realize modern royalty faces the same challenge as their ancestors, balancing human desire within human expectation. They just do it with less style, more lawsuits, and infinitely worse operational security. The divine right of kings evolved into the verified blue checkmark of kings, equally meaningless but somehow more pathetic. Tomorrow morning, another young royal will wake up to find their intimate moments trending on Twitter, their dignity dissolving in real time while palace PR teams craft statements about private matters and learning experiences. The monarchy endures not through divine providence, but through humanity's endless appetite for watching privileged people make terrible decisions with their genitals. And as you drift back through the centuries of royal bedchambers and palace intrigues, let all those scandalous secrets fade into the soft darkness of approaching sleep. The emperors and empresses, sultans and courtesans, all return to their places in history's vast tapestry, their passionate pursuits now just whispers in the corridors of time. Your journey through humanity's most intimate power plays comes to its gentle close, leaving you with stories that textbooks dared not tell, and images that museums keep in storage. The palace doors close one by one, the silk curtains fall still, and the only sound remaining is your own steady breathing as you sink deeper into your pillow. Perhaps you'll dream of golden Byzantine chambers or moonlit Aztec temples, but more likely you'll simply rest, entertained and slightly scandalized, carrying with you the knowledge that power and pleasure have always danced the same ancient dance. The crowned heads of history return to their portraits and statues, their very human desires locked once more behind the veneer of royal dignity. Sleep now comes like a gentle servant, drawing the curtains on our tale. May your dreams be far more peaceful than any royal bedchamber, and may you wake refreshed, perhaps grateful for the simple privacy of your own quiet room. The stories will keep. They've lasted this long, after all, waiting in history's shadows for the next curious soul willing to peek behind the palace walls. Sweet dreams, dear listener, and remember, sometimes the most entertaining history lessons are the ones they never meant to preserve.